Thanks for joining us for the May edition of 3Squares. We are recording very early on the Friday before Memorial Day. Actually, it's early for Ricky Volpe, our guest, because he's in California. For the rest of us, it's the middle of the day. But Ricky came back from Europe just to be with us today, so we're feeling pretty special about that. Charlie Arnott with the Center for Food Integrity and Look East, dedicating my career to keeping the food system trustworthy, along with my co-hosts Kevin Ryan and Susan Schwally, and we are sneaking up on our, I think it's 500th episode, I think, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So later this month, not later this month, later this year, we will have episode 500 of 3Squares. So that's going to be
very exciting. I don't know how that
exciting.
happened, but
we'll get some
great.
coffee mugs or something, some kind of tchotchke that celebrates that event.
T-shirts, caps.
I don't do trucker caps. I do the other kind of caps.
Not trucker. No trucker.
What about long sleeve tees? I don't know. What do you think? We should do something.
3Squares going down the arm. We'll talk later.
That could be good. All right, Kevin and Susan, introduce yourselves so we can get on to the meaningful work of talking to Ricky.
Sure. I'm Susan Schwally. I'm with QualSites. I lead their sensor business where we are transforming, understanding consumer product usage through passive data collection.
And I'm Kevin Ryan with Malachite Strategy and Research, helping CPG and retail companies at the front end of innovation and strategy.
So in preparation for the release of Mission Impossible this weekend, I watched the previous one. So I kind of had, and so Susan, it sounds kind of like what you do is the entity, right? You're just out there collecting all of this information, and then
yeah, we're collecting information.
It becomes the entity.
The entity. Yeah, I won't go into my spiel about what we do, but I'll have to watch that to see if your connection there is correct, Charlie.
Yeah, very interesting. So we are thrilled today to have Ricky Volpe with us. He was going to join us in California when we were going to do 3Squares Live, and then the darn COVID took Susan out of the equation, and she was not with us for very good reasons. But, it's always a roll of the dice when you invite an economist to speak because you just don't know what you're going to get. But the reviews and comments were off the charts. Everybody loved Ricky's presentation, and probably more than that, his very engaging way to respond and answer questions, in addition to which he's immensely qualified. So he got his Ph.D. from UC Davis in 2010. But what I think is really interesting, he worked for the USDA ERS, Economic Research Service. Does that still exist, Ricky?
Ish.
Okay. So he researched a variety of topics, including food price information, competitiveness in the food industry, the healthiness of grocery purchases, and here's the key, he was responsible for forecasting retail food price inflation at the national level, which is way cool, and it's going to tie into our topic about tariffs today. So at Cal Poly, where he currently lives in Paradise there at San Luis Obispo, Ricky teaches courses on food retail and supply chain management, transportation, logistics, and data analysts. He also works closely with industry leaders in food retailing, wholesaling, distribution to facilitate collaboration on public-private partnerships, student internships, and scholarships. And I am pleased, Ricky, thank you so much for joining us at the crack o' dawn in California for 3Squares.
Thanks for having me. I didn't realize that we're closing in on 500 episodes. I'm proud to be a part of this storied tradition.
Yeah, it's great. So we had the head of comms from Kroger on a couple of episodes ago, and actually she was live with you met her. She was live at the meeting in Newport Beach, and when she said, "You're talking too slowly. I normally listen at 1.5 speed," but no one's ever accused me of talking too slowly. So, all right, Kevin. With that, we're going to kick it off. You're up.
Yeah, no, hi, Ricky. Good to meet you. So as Charlie said, tariffs. I mean, there's nothing else that folks aren't talking about, I think, within the CPG world at least. And I'm curious, from your point of view, what food categories are you looking at when it comes to tariff? I mean, specifically. I mean, I know that everything is kind of involves everything else, but are there specific food categories? Are there specific areas that CPG, companies should be looking at? Are there ones that are, in the blind spot for some? I just like to get your overall thought on how tariffs could be affecting them.
Sure. Yeah, and that's a really important question. I guess I'll sort of open. I'll open with the general and then maybe drill down to the specific a little bit. A lot of folks are talking about avocados and tequila and these sort of key inputs and imports that come in from places like Canada and Mexico. What I have my eye on more closely, and something that's going to be a little bit harder to measure, but it's already starting to filter in. But for the record, the CPI numbers that came out this month showed sort of normal inflation, but it's too early for this for these tariffs to be filtering through price transmission. And we can sort of talk about that. It's a little wonky, but the U.S. food supply chain, the global food system is so complex. There's so many moving pieces. It takes real time for changes in input costs to sort of filter through, especially to CPG products. It can take months. It can take up to 6 months to start seeing real impacts coming in. So I just want to stress that. And related to that, what I'm really concerned about, where I think we're going to see real inflationary impacts of the tariffs as they stand right now, to my knowledge, and I was talking with you guys as we were sort of warming up. I'm not up on the latest headlines on the current administration's tariffs. They change quite rapidly. I understand there's discussions of heightened tariffs on the EU, for example, but the tariffs in place with China, as an example, are pretty steep. Even the ones that have been rolled back are pretty steep, and they have the real potential, not potential, the likelihood of affecting the prices for things like steel and aluminum. And I'm sure that the folks at Food Integrity and elsewhere are sort of on this, but I want to stress to listeners that the boring stuff matters. The stuff that happens behind the scenes, the stuff that most consumers don't see or think about, the stuff that you unwrap and throw away when the product shows up in the mail or when you bring it home from the supermarket, that contributes a huge chunk of the sort of cost share of the foods that we buy and the foods that, this is food service, this is food away from home, this is grocery stores, this is packaged and prepared foods. And we would not have our sort of modernized, efficient, safe food system if it weren't for these building blocks, right? These building materials, and we're going to see the costs. We're already seeing the prices of these going up, and this is going to accelerate inflation. The steel and tariff. The steel and aluminum tariffs alone are probably enough to push us above historical norms in terms of food price inflation. But just to sort of answer the question you asked, when you want to understand within individual food categories, where are we likely to see impacts? So it's a function of really two things. It's how important is the import share of the product or commodity we're talking about as a share of what we consume in the U.S., and then how many sort of substitutes do we have for that? And that's probably intuitive to a lot of folks, but it will help explain why, we import a lot of wheat from Canada. My current prediction is that I don't think we're going to see particularly strong or noticeable food price impacts on a result of that. We also grow a lot of wheat. We import wheat from other places. We export wheat that we can sort of turn that around as needed. And also, for most foods that we think about that are packaged and processed and rely on wheat is a pretty small share of the total value. When we talk about something like avocados that I opened up with, we import almost all of our avocados from Mexico. U.S. production is small. It would be very costly to shift our imports to places like Peru. And come on, you guys know, for Americans, there's no substitute for avocados. So that's an area where an import slapped on them with Mexico, we'll feel that right away, and we'll feel that hard.
So what about kale? Do you think there's going to be an impact on kale? I'm just so Rick, it's an inside joke. I hate kale, and I've never.
I was going to say, where are we going with this?
I've
You
never
would
believed
love that kale would be completely.
I would love to see a
off the system.
700% increase in the.
You could grow it, Charlie.
I don't want to grow. Why would I do that?
Well-
It's not a food. Okay, back to the real questions. So traditionally, as an economist, you had a pretty good formula, right? And there have been models that you've been able to use to say, if you were responsible for forecasting food inflation, you kind of knew the variables that were going to go in there, and you could say, okay, I'm going to plug in this one and that one and the other one, and boom, there's my model and there's the outcome. But is trade policy now replacing some of those other variables in the model? Is it playing a bigger role? Is it actually going to play a larger role than things like fuel or labor or other variables that you might have had in that model?
Well, the models that economists such as myself and the folks who have sort of, as you said in my introduction, I used to sort of take the helm at food price forecasting at USDA ERS, and that office, it's called the FPO. They're still active. They're still churning out CPI and PPI forecasts every month, and the models that they use they've been refined since my time. I left USDA 11 years ago, but the fundamental building blocks are the same. And what's nice about that methodology, it's of course not perfect. There's far too much uncertainty in the future and moving pieces. The forecasts are never perfect, but the building blocks of the model actually would account for these tariffs if we understood where they're in place and how long they're in place. And that can get real wonky real fast. But I mean, the model accounts for changes in raw input prices, right? It accounts for changes in commodity prices and changes in energy prices. So technically speaking, if we actually understood the extent of these tariffs and whether or not they're going to be in place for a month or 3 months, whatever, we could do it. But your point is taken that there's too much uncertainty to do that accurately, especially given how quickly the headlines on tariffs are changing. To your question about the sort of importance of these tariffs, I think there's a very real possibility for these tariffs to have an inflationary impact that, at least in the short run, and by the short run, do I mean the rest of 25 into 2026, probably, to overshadow those traditional drivers of food prices that you were talking about. So things like labor, transportation, logistics, energy, which are pain points. We can talk about those, but tariffs can be thought of as a tax, right? They can be thought of as a tax. And, I think you know this. I mean, I'm good friends with a lot of folks at the California Grocers Association, and it's helpful to think of all of these sort of market distortions as taxes. So why are food prices higher in California than in most of the rest of the country, even though we grow a lot of the food here? Well, so much of that has to do with the regulatory state in California, and so many of these regulations that are applied to retailers and processors and manufacturers and logisticians in California can be thought of as taxes on food prices. And the proof is in the pudding. We do pay more for food here in California than almost anywhere else in the nation. Why am I saying that? If we think of these tariffs as a tax on food, we have proof of concept. We've seen the direct impact that can have on food prices, even identical food prices, comparing place to place. So, and this is going to hit us nationwide, right? This is going to be distributed across the 50 states. So do we have the potential for food price inflation to hit 5, 6, 7% going into 2025, 2026? Absolutely, largely as a result of these tariffs as they've been laid out and as the effects they would likely have on food prices.
Interesting.
So, Ricky, you mentioned a pain point that I want to get your perspective on, because it kind of makes my head explode. And it's really about supply chain and logistics, because obviously we have the tariff, the tax, as you've described it. And then those tariffs are designed, if I'm comprehending right, to bring more manufacturing production back to the United States. So I don't want to argue whether or not that'll happen, although we can talk about that if you want. But to me, it seems like it's going to shift around dramatically logistics, supply chain, and that seems like another cost to me. And has it? No, yes, no. Can you?
Oh no, I'm sorry. I'm shaking my head because I think the reality is probably even bleaker than you're imagining. But yes, I want to finish your thought. Yeah.
No.
And Susan usually thinks bleak.
So yeah, right, exactly. So go ahead, add on to it. Go ahead.
I may seem chirpy, but I'm really bleak. Go ahead.
No, and you guys can, and the listeners can look this up after we're off the call. There's some really good work that's been done on the tariffs that were put in place during the first Trump administration, some of which stayed in place into the Biden administration. And there's a lot of really interesting insights that came out of that. But one of which, in my view, is sort of underreported and not very well understood. And that's that, there is no magic formula by which low-cost domestic production ramps up when the cost of imports also increases, right? And that's especially true for food. So if we want to talk about calculators and t-shirts and electric vehicles or whatever, even if we assume that we have all the inputs we need to do them, that's a different story, because these durable goods don't rely on seasonality, right? They don't rely on weather conditions. They don't rely on requiring huge amounts of land or huge amounts of water, right? When we start talking about food, the situation's it's frankly even less realistic to imagine that we're going to shift food production, especially, and manufacturing to the U.S. to sort of make up what we're losing internationally. And just to So the thing about these tariffs that are in place that really concerns me is that tariffs on the global food system, on our imports of food, these have the potential to at least temporarily reverse a lot of progress that we've made in terms of food availability and food price inflation over basically since World War II in the US. Another sort of underreported stat that I'm very fond of sort of putting out there is that in the long run, food in the US is cheaper. I said this when I was down in Newport Beach. In the long run, inflation is down, and if you control for the value of US dollar, food is more affordable today than it was 20, 30, 40 years ago. And that's even after the challenges we had during the Great Recession and during COVID. The gap is narrowed a little bit, but that still remains the case. People ask, well, how is that possible? This is Econ 101, the idea that we've seen the supply curve shift out to the right, which has brought Q up and P down. And of course, technology has a role in that, but the biggest factor in that is that we're just importing a whole lot more food. We're augmenting our capacity to feed Americans using foods that are grown cheaply and safely and affordably and very productively around the world. So like, we are never going to corner the market on mangoes or cinnamon or bananas in the United States, right? It would just be effectively impossible given the resources that we have. So to sort of come back to your question, Susan, like, even if we were to start shifting production and manufacturing domestically because these tariffs are in place and that's where the market moves, the cost and therefore the prices on this domestically produced food would be, at least in the short to medium run, significantly higher than what we're accustomed to paying on imported goods because of the challenges associated. And you touched on one that I haven't really been talking about when I sort of get on my soapbox, which is that refrigerated truck transportation in the US is already effectively at the breaking point. I mean, it's already hitting basic corner solution where there aren't enough drivers and we have, berry growers in California making shipping decisions not based on the value of the product or the demand, but based on refrigerated capacity, which is not a good thing. That's not where we want to be. So we're already there. So I would love someone to explain to me where are all the trucks and drivers and warehouses in DC is going to come from if we significantly ramp up domestic production. So Susan, I think you're on the point. I just think it's infeasible and going to be very, very costly for our food system to change to become primarily domestic for most things.
I'm now going to plant a victory garden. Thank you, Ricky.
Good luck with your coffee. At least you'll have single source coffee, right?
Right.
Ricky, just so you know,
you'll get one bean. You'll get one bean.
My New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, my coffee, and my dark chocolate, which are the three mainstays of my sanity, are being threatened, and it's problematic for me.
It's a very wobbly three-legged stool that
She
Susan
was just
has.
hanging on to begin with, right? And so this is a real threat to her mental health. So
It is.
And we just don't have great domestic alternatives for those, and we probably won't anytime soon. So that's.
I mean, I can switch to California. The wine is probably the easiest.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But Ricky, to your point, we
taste.
don't grow cinnamon. We aren't even in the right climate to grow cinnamon. So it's like, it's not going to happen probably. I mean, we're not Vietnam. So that makes complete sense. So Ricky, speaking of all of that, and you were talking about how, the price of food could climb. What is the price elasticity right now? What's the climate for that right now within consumers? I mean, has that changed since COVID? Are you seeing people, think about that differently and what they're willing to spend or?
Yeah. So my understanding, and really a lot of this is based on sort of reading the tea leaves. I mean, just, full disclosure, I don't have access to sort of up to date, Circana or Nielsen data, but here's my understanding, and it's informed by, talking to our friends at FMI and NGA and that sort of stuff, but also building on where the US consumer has been heading, since the 80s or 90s, is that, to my understanding, it's not that we've seen a sea change in sort of the demand elasticity for food. I mean, food is, of course, a staple, right? And the overall elasticity for food as a product is pretty inelastic, right? It's pretty small. What I do think is increasingly the case is that brand loyalty has eroded, and it's eroded in a big way. And you're nodding, you guys are all nodding, and that's good news, because I worry saying that in front of the wrong audience. But I do believe that's the case, and there's a lot of sort of you guys can look up the marketing literature, which some of it's pretty dense, but there's a lot of evidence to support that both brand and store loyalty are down, and that's really a function of price sensitivity. It's the idea that shoppers are looking at more affordable options, and so when times get challenged in the US, we see the food at home share tick up, right? As consumers shift towards buying at home, saving money, preparing food at home. And then within the food at home chunk, we see consumers shifting towards store brands. And Charlie was there in Newport when I sort of gave my spiel on private labels or store brands. I think they're really fascinating, and they're a really major sort of driver of change in the food retail arena. But I just bring them up because if you want to see something that's emblematic of how consumer perception has changed, just look at private labels. When I was a kid growing up in Boston, private labels were generics, right? And they were the domain of price sensitive, low income shoppers who are on a budget. That has changed in a big way, and it's largely because that loyalty to those household brands has really faded, and there's this idea of I need ketchup, I need mustard, I need cinnamon, I need frozen pancakes, whatever it may be. Hey, this store brand looks pretty good. The ingredients are very comparable, and it's $1 cheaper, right? And so, and that choice is being made because basically since 2007, 2008, food prices have become volatile, unpredictable, and inflation has ticked up relative to that baseline. So that's what I'm looking at. It's the changes within the grocery sector, not overall demand for groceries, that I think is where we should be looking.
I mean, there's a one-word answer: Costco.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Charlie gets
Yeah.
everything from Costco, even his
My
clothes.
wardrobe, my food,
Hot dogs.
everything,
Hot dogs.
everything. My mortgage, home insurance, everything. Right? It all comes from Costco.
Oh, eyeglasses, right?
Oh yeah,
everything.
everything. I mean, there's nothing you need that you can't get at a Costco. Really.
That's right.
And then the $1.50 hot dog to top it off. Right? I mean,
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Same
Can't
price
get
since is it same price since Reagan was president, I think?
I think something in the 80s. Yeah, that
Yeah.
they've promised never to mess
Their
with that.
loss
It's-
leader gets
They
Charlie in the
will
door.
not. They will not sell anything at a loss, according to them. But who knows?
Even the rotisserie chicken? I mean, I can't see their
I
their
think they
numbers, of course.
vertically
Yeah, they
integrated.
vertically
to make
integrated.
sure.
They own their own chicken farms, and they
Okay.
backward integrated because they were not able to get enough consistent supply of
Mhm.
that chicken, which is great, but it ends up being a $200 chicken when you go into the store to buy the rotisserie chicken.
Right?
Yeah.
Although
Yeah.
I think my concession stand hot dogs may have beat Costco on price.
Yeah, but come on.
Maybe. They were good. They were all beef.
You can't convince Charlie that the Costco hot dog is anything
No.
but.
Ricky, we can
That's
talk
right.
about the economics of my when I ran the Little League concession stand. But seriously, like you're speaking my language. And by the way, I've worked at IRI, Circana, and the MPD group, and tracked in home and away from home. And I
Oh,
wish
great.
I knew you earlier. And you are spot on about the
Oh,
consumer.
what a relief.
Absolutely. I wouldn't expect anything otherwise. But, so working with CPGs and most of my career with food, they're always worried about pricing strategy, right? And we're running those elasticities and working with them. And I have an opinion on this, but it's not steeped in the research that you have. So if a CPG came to you and said, what should my pricing strategy be? And I realize this is a loaded question and it varies by the category. Just in general, where would you tell them to lean in?
Yeah, that's a great question. And again, kind of like you just said, I mean, it's a very nuanced question, and it's not, if I truly believe that I was really good at answering questions like that, I'd probably be doing that for a living and making a lot more money than I currently do.
Stocks.
Yeah, yeah. No, but I think so in this modern era where we're all on social media and we all have smartphones and we're all taking pictures and scanning barcodes and QR codes while we're going through the supermarket, I think that both retailers and CPG companies, manufacturers, need to increasingly be careful, right? There's a narrative that there's price gouging going on, that there's shrinkflation, that there's all these problems, and in some cases that may be justified, but especially when I think about retailers, my understanding is their margins are narrow, and they're just as unhappy as we are. Anyway, if we're looking specifically at the manufacturing sector and looking at what to do, I absolutely understand and expect that costs can be expected to be going up in the near term, if only because of those fundamental sort of like, the building blocks, the steel and aluminum, to say nothing of commodities and energy prices and all of that. So I would really just focus on a sound, data-driven promotional strategy. The one thing that, to my understanding, and Susan, you probably have done more of this than I have directly, but like I did a fair amount of work when I was with USDA and then a little bit afterwards when I still had access to data, sort of looking at promotional elasticities and the ability for promotions to sort of build brand perception and brand market share and expand categories and all of that. And the power of promotions, in my mind, especially given that consumers are increasingly price sensitive, that's never going to go away, right? So, but the key is, and we could spend the next hour and a half talking about this, there is no silver bullet when it comes to promotions, and that's why I stress data driven, right? A sound promotional strategy for a given category or a product should understand the demand elasticity for that product, cross price elasticities with other products, with substitutes, and with complements, the power of seasonality, demographic concerns, and all of that feeds into when should a product go on promotion? Should they emphasize infrequent deep promotions or frequent, low promotions? How extensively should they be advertised? What works better, right? A percentage cut versus a dollar cut versus a quantity enforced, like buy one, get one. It's very, very nuanced, but CPG companies and retailers have the tools they need to look back historically and understand what works and what doesn't, and to plan a promotional calendar to do that. And just to wrap it up, the reason why I say that is because I think in the next 6, 12, 18 months, it's going to be very, very hard to lower shelf prices. I think shelf prices are going to continue to tick up. That's the way of the world, and the tariffs add a complication. But consumers really appreciate those promotions. They really appreciate, oh, okay, great. You know what I mean? Like, at least this week I'm saving money on whatever it is, right? And I'm getting a real break, and I can stock up, and that makes me feel good about this purchase, and it makes me trust this brand or this company more. So that's my answer. The devil's in the details, but understanding promotions, their impacts, and how to plan them, that's it.
Yeah, and then what that promotion does to take you out of the mix if someone stocks up. I think Charlie is taking time on us. We could talk about this for hours.
We could.
Thank you for that perspective.
Ricky, I wish that you had talked to Elton John's management team before they did a 4-year-long farewell tour.
Oh, yeah.
Like, how long does it take to say goodbye, right? I mean, come on, really?
Well, he's global.
That promotion just doesn't, that one just didn't hold water.
Charlie.
All right, we're going to kick it over to Kevin,
He's a
Quizmaster Kevin, to begin the quiz for our May edition. So, Ricky, we warned you that it is interesting, but we also heard before we came on officially that Ricky does trivia on a weekly basis.
He does, yeah.
Susan and I may be in trouble. All right, Quizmaster Kevin, you're on.
All right, so usually I have a theme. This time it's just Kevin going down weird food rabbit holes kind of theme is really what it is. So I have enough now that I can actually, I always kind of collect this was odd, something that I read, and so I put them together. So that's the theme, which is not really a theme. But so first question, if you have a dog, you may have noticed that sometimes their feet can smell like corn chips. I don't know if you've ever smelled your dog's feet. Yeah. It's a harmless condition because of naturally occurring yeast, sometimes called Frito feet. Have you ever heard of that?
We call it
However,
feet,
other animals are known to have unusual food-related smells. So, other animals smell like food. So, which of the following is not a true animal food aroma? So, one of them is wrong. The rest are true. So, you have to find the one that's not true. Is it A, spadefoot toads found in California and parts of Mexico release a secretion when threatened that smells like peanut butter? Is it B, the bear cat, also known as the binturong, a tree-living relative of the civet from Southeast Asia? It secretes a scent that smells like freshly popped popcorn. Is it C, the Delta smelt, a small endangered fish native to one estuary in California that smells like peeled cucumber? Or is it D, a western furred glider, nocturnal mammal, roughly the size of a squirrel, native to parts of the Congo, is said to smell like chocolate due to the vegetation it eats? Which one of those is the only one that's not true?
I'm going to go with the smelt just because I know that the smelt has caused untold challenges for agriculture in California.
Okay. So you think that one's not true? Okay.
I have no idea. I have no idea.
That's fine.
So I'm going to
Susan or Ricky?
Yeah, I mean, that was C, right? I'm going to say C, and similar, I live in California, I'd never heard of it. So that's my guess.
Okay. Susan?
Was B the civet-related bear with the popcorn?
Yes.
I'm going popcorn foot or whatever it was.
Okay, it was just popcorn. You all are incorrect. It's D, the Western fur glider. I made that one up about smells like chocolate. So all the others are true.
I thought you made the Western fur glider up. I had no idea. I mean, is that a real thing?
Is there a Western fur glider?
I think there is a Western fur glider. It does not smell like chocolate, as far as I know.
Peanut butter toad was also something that...
Peanut butter toad is interesting. Yeah, and so, they're all true. In fact, there's a lot of animals. The Western gray kangaroo in Australia, it secretes a scent from its chest. It smells like curry. The crested owlet smells like citrus, and there's actually something called a peppermint stick insect that smells Like peppermint.
I think the peanut butter toad. I think the peanut butter toad could be a promotional opportunity for Reese's.
Totally. It totally could be.
Yeah.
All right. Number
Should be
2.
on Jeopardy, and they could have a category: animals that smell like food.
Animals. Yes.
Yeah.
I think that would be really cool. Which of the following unusual combos was once used and consumed together in history? Okay. So which of the following was
Not peanut butter and chocolate.
not peanut butter and chocolate? So was it A, ancient Incas ate wild potatoes only after dipping them in powdered clay? They did this after watching llamas lick clay before eating the tubers. The clay removed the toxicity from the primitive potatoes. Is that A? Did that happen? Is it B? Ancient Chinese scholars were said to snack on dried lotus seeds wrapped in slips of rice paper that had information written on the rice paper while they were studying, believing that they absorbed the knowledge through eating the rice paper. Was it C? During Prohibition, there was a fad at speakeasies in Chicago offering chocolate-covered sardines as a palate cleanser between whiskey shots. Or was it D? Victorian children were sometimes given a slice of onion dipped in charcoal dust or wood ashes on their birthday in a belief it would build character for the new year. So which of those are true? Which one is true combination?
I'm going to go potatoes and clay because of the concern about poisoning come from certain tubers in parts of the world.
Okay.
That's mine. I'm surprised you didn't bring up corn and lye.
Well, keep going. Go ahead.
Because of that, I'm going corn and clay.
Okay.
It's potatoes.
It was
and clay.
potatoes and clay.
Sorry, potatoes
There's
and
no
clay.
corn.
The
There's no
clay
corn here.
No corn.
You're fixated.
I'm stuck on lye. Okay, go ahead.
Go ahead, Ricky.
Yeah, I'm gonna say B just because it sounds like a good idea. Maybe it works.
Okay. Susan and Charlie are correct. They can see my mix here. Yes, they did actually. Ancient Peruvians or Incans did actually, watch llamas lick clay before eating the potatoes and did that. I don't know how it tasted, but yes, and the rest are not true.
How did the llamas figure that out? This stuff amazes me. Okay.
I know.
Well, I mean, because one of the most popular dominant tubers can be poisoned if it's not processed correctly.
That's right.
But how the llama go, I'm licking this clay and eating this potato, and that worked. Like, I don't know.
Because the llamas that didn't died.
I know. Right. That says Darwin. But, okay. Anyway.
All right. Number 3. Which of the following is a real food job? Is it A, cheese listener? It's a common in some hard cheese producing companies in Italy. A cheese listener taps cheese rounds in a company's inventory with a small special hammer and listens for the signature sounds that means it's full ripe. Is it B, steam wrangler? In food photography and filming, they adjust humidity, lighting, and water vapor to make food appear freshly cooked and steamy. Is it C, a chew consultant? They train actors on how to chew more pleasantly while still being understandable for movies and TV. Or is it D, underwater pizza delivery person? At Jules Underwater Lodge, a hotel in Key Largo, Florida, guests can have pizza delivered right to their submerged rooms by a certified scuba diver who transports the pizza in a waterproof container. Which of those is a real job?
What was the first one again?
A cheese listener.
Oh, yeah. I'm going cheese listener. That sounds feasible.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna go D only because I feel like I've heard of that. I'm saying
okay.
D.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm going to go D because I actually know it's true.
You are correct. It is D, underwater pizza. And as far as I know, I went on their website that they still are in existence. So if the hotel will deliver a pizza or a meal to your underwater room rates are $1,500 per person. But if you just hang out in an underwater room for 3.5 hours and get a pizza, it's only $430 per couple plus tax. All right. Number 4, which of the following is a real food-related term that has been mentioned in medical journals? So which of the following is actually been mentioned in medical journals related to food? Is it A, grater knuckle? This is the injury caused by scraping a knuckle or hand on a grater or rasp. Is it B, corona dermatitis, the discoloration of skin due to exposing the skin to lime juice and the sun, and as when squeezing a lime into a corona? Is it C, whiskers elbow, a repetitive strain injury, mostly seen in pastry chefs, caused by frequently whisking or stirring, similar to tennis elbow? Or is it blender burn, the face and torso burns when people open up the blender when blending a hot liquid and explodes onto the face and body? Which of those is a food-related injury that has been mentioned in a medical journal?
Oh, wow. I mean,
I'm going
you didn't mention
whiskers elbow.
avocado hand.
Yeah, I'm going whiskers elbow.
Whiskers elbow. What was yours, Susan?
Avocado hand.
That wasn't a choice, Susan. That's
Thing,
too easy.
though. I'm going greater rasp. Or
Greater knuckle.
rash.
Greater knuckle. Greater knuckle.
Greater
Ricky?
knuckle.
I hate to keep agreeing with Charlie, but I'm going with the elbow because I have elbow issues. So I think that's
Okay.
it.
No, you're all incorrect. And the only reason I know this is because I've had this. It's B, corona dermatitis, also
What?
called
No.
Mexican beer hand or
No.
photodermatitis. It is, I didn't get it from drinking Corona with it, but I did squeeze lime and then went into the sun. And all of a sudden I had like a dark mark
Oh
on
my
my
goodness.
skin.
I was
And
saying,
so you
don't
have to be
drink.
careful now that summer's coming. If you get lime juice or lemon juice onto your skin and then go out in the sun, you can get this dermatitis. It goes
That's
away,
why-
but yeah.
That's
Okay.
why we put that on our hair in the 80s.
Yeah, exactly.
Get the,
exactly.
the that I now pay for that you can't see
Right.
those
Highlights.
highlights.
All right, last question. Here we
Last
go.
question. In the 18th century, what kitchen device was sometimes carried by respectable gentlemen for customized use at the table when they were dining? Was it A, a personal mustard spoon? Mustard was a common condiment at the table, and having one's own spoon was seen as being worldly. Was it A, a pocket nutmeg grater used to grate nutmeg into drinks or onto your food? It was a fashionable statement of refinement. Was it C, a collapsible truffle slicer used to delicately shave truffles over meat or eggs while traveling or dining out? Or was it D, a crystal vinegar atomizer used to mist salads or fish dishes with a personalized blend of vinegar and herbs?
Nutmeg. I'm going nutmeg.
Nutmeg, Susan's locking it in.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
I'm
locking it
with
in.
her. It's
nutmeg
either
or train in
it's either
Connecticut.
mustard or nutmeg.
I'm doing this.
going-
I'm doing the spoon. It's the easiest one.
Okay, mustard. Which one did you do, Charlie?
Nutmeg.
Nutmeg. All right, Susan and Charlie, you are correct. A nutmeg grater. So if you go to some thrift stores, you can still find personalized gentleman's nutmeg grater. So it was a very much seen in England and colonial America. It was very fashionable to have a very small silver or ivory nutmeg grater because it was seen. And you would actually bring your own nutmeg with you and put it over it. And then it was a
Was it
flex.
like the salt of the time?
It was more of just it was expensive and it was seen as it was a flex. I showed you how much money you had. So
I've also read that they do that on painkillers. I've just read that they will grate nutmeg. The painkiller, the drink.
Your
The,
painkiller?
no, the painkiller, the drink,
Yeah.
painkiller,
Oh, I
the
don't know
rum.
that.
They'll grate nutmeg on top of it. So
Oh.
But did you bring your own to do that?
I did
That's-
not.
No,
I did not.
exactly.
I was in the
Yeah.
Caribbean. They
I know what you're
Don't
eating for
don't eat
Christmas.
too much because nutmeg at certain amounts is a hallucinogen. So maybe
Ooh,
that's
I did
the
not know
point.
that. It could be.
That's probably why
I think
they
it's a painkiller.
did it.
All right, Ricky, thank you. Your insight was
Right,
invaluable.
You want to know?
And I appreciate you sticking around for the quiz and the
I don't
nonsense
even
that we have.
remember what we were talking about now. Yeah.
But it's great fun. And for you to have just traveled back from Europe and gotten up at the crack of dawn, we appreciate you making that commitment and dedication to us. You have been listening to 3Squares. We are so glad you're with us. If you want to connect with us, you can reach out at 3squaresmail@gmail.com, the numeral 3squaresmail@gmail.com. And we will see you again in June for the next edition of 3Squares. Have a great holiday weekend, everybody. Talk soon. Take care.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
very much.
Bye.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye.